Ontario Premier Doug Smith talks a lot of smack about Donald Trump one day, and the next day he changes his tune completely. Does this indicate a man who doesn't know what his mind is? Or is it a guy who can't figure out which way the wind is blowing? Welcome to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. I'm your host. Premier Doug Smith was talking about a bunch of money that is given to the skilled trades, a bunch of taxpayers' dollars that he's throwing around in an effort to try to convince people that even though he's been in power now for 3 terms, he's just catching up to what needs to be done for the province. And it was a desperate attempt to try and distract Canadians or the Ontario voting public from what the situation is. Of course, we all understand that Southern Ontario is being decimated by the auto manufacturing being moved into the United States of America. Everybody knows that under Carney's tariffs, life is becoming more and more expensive, 25% more expensive across the board. I mean, we don't make anything in Canada, so when Carney puts a tariff on it, obviously, it's going to cost Canadians a lot more money. Whereas Doug Ford was trying to make it a bunch of big rhetoric talk against Donald Trump. This was probably before he saw the disastrous appointment that the Prime Minister of Canada had with the President Donald Trump. Now, I'm going to show you a couple of clips where he was talking a bunch of smack, and then not even 24 hours later, his tune changed completely.
President Trump's tariffs, this guy drives me nuts. I just get wound up. You know, what drives me nuts, you see this guy on TV, we don't need Canada. Really? I guess you don't need our high-grade nickel that they use 57% of their nickel to build their military, their aerospace, and manufacturing. Imagine if we never gave them our high-grade nickel.
Well, I believe therein lies the problem, isn't it, Doug Ford? Right out of the gate, where you're watching him on TV. So you're picking up your understanding of the American president, not because you're talking to people down in the States, not because you're calling him up directly with your mass of natural resources and your tens of thousands of auto workers that are being impacted by his decisions. Danielle Smith, Scott Moe, they're going down there and talking to the United States, to the Americans one-on-one. They're taking the steps that is required. You got Eby out in British Columbia throwing a temper tantrum. And you, with all of your natural resources, are sitting there in Ontario letting Carney take the lead and watching Donald Trump on TV. If you had spoken to him, or if you had paid attention in any way, shape, or form, you might understand that Donald Trump just signed a natural resources bill, a deal where he's going to give the Ukrainians a whole buttload of money, and in return, they're going to give them access to all of their natural resources. I wonder if one of those natural resources from Ukraine is nickel. According to Google AI, Ukraine has significant nickel reserves, particularly in regions like 2 places that I won't even try to name for fear that I will butcher them that badly. These deposits are considered promising for future nickel mining, especially with the increasing demand for electric vehicles and their batteries. Ukraine also has reserves for other crucial minerals like lithium, cobalt, manganese, which are also important for the energy transition. And then Google breaks them down on, what's around and all of that kind of thing. Doug Ford talking out his ass saying, oh no, because we have a giant nickel, and we have a lot of it. He believes that Donald Trump is the only one in the whole wide North America or the whole wide planet that doesn't understand that there might be other reserves, and that he knows what he's losing by trying to push Canada to be. I mean, there's a theory here that he's trying to make it so that Canadians will gladly join so that they will get the economic relief, because he knows we're being led by people who don't know what they're doing, except in some parts of the country. He understands that the Liberal government with their ESG and their net zero is destroying the economy, and that people, when they are flat broke and dirt poor, become desperate and are willing to do things that might not make their leadership happy, but certainly will make the population happy. So you're standing there in a room full of people talking, I don't know, like you're sitting around in grade 7 talking bad about some person that you are angry at because they didn't do what you want to do. In addition to that, why, if you have all of these nickel reserves and you know that they're so important to the machinery of all of the various things that you just listed off for the Americans, why are you not doing something to make sure that they are developed inside of Canada?
Or my friend Scott Moe out in Saskatchewan, if he cut off the potash, that 87% of the farmers down in the U.S. use Saskatchewan Potash.
Saskatchewan's potash is put under the thumb of Mark Carney's ESG net zero, and we all know that it has a carbon tax put on it and an export tax. But I wonder if Trump can get it less expensive in Ukraine. Well, what do you know? According to Google AI, Ukraine has quite a bit of it. There's some of it that's under the Russian occupation, but that's okay because Donald Trump's the only world leader talking to, or the only Western world leader that's talking to Putin. So I'm sure he can figure out a way to get his hands on it if it means that the agriculture in the middle of his country is going to get the fertilizer that it requires so that it can meet the needs of the country. Russian invasion of Ukraine has significantly impacted the global potash market, particularly regarding supply and prices. Ukraine potash deposits primarily in, again, two regions I'm not even going to try. Depression have been affected, with some areas being temporarily occupied. This has led to increased reliance on imports, including countries like Canada, and has contributed to the fluctuation in potash prices. Of course, the problem for Canada is that we have an industrial carbon tax put on it. Then we have an export tax. Then we have the idea that we can't get it to the open ocean to sell it to any of the countries that Ukraine might be willing to sell it to, because of the the bans and the fact that Saskatchewan is so severely landlocked. And Doug Ford talking like a complete, I don't know, like somebody who's just not aware of the situation, who just heard from a person and just tried to get a bunch of claps and a bunch of laughs in a room. Not the behavior of a man who claims, who's running the province, one of the largest populated provinces in Canada, with all of the natural resources sitting on the Canadian Shield and all of that it provides, without unlocking the northern of Ontario, without talking about all of the jobs that are going to be lost. He's just throwing a little bit of a fit, a little bit of a temper tantrum. Seems to me, anyway.
Or the uranium coming from Saskatchewan.
Well, let's have a look. Ukraine possesses significant uranium resources and is a producer of the element. Though its production is smaller compared to global leaders like Kazakhstan or Canada, Ukraine's uranium reserves are estimated at 185,000 tons, with 70,000 tons of it recoverable at less than $80 a kilo. You get the point. There's lots of stuff in Ukraine that he now has unfettered access to. He doesn't have to put up with any of the Canadian boundaries. He doesn't have to put up with the carbon tax. He doesn't have to put up with any of the foolishness coming out of the net zero, or any of the you bent a blade of grass, so now all of a sudden we're going to picket the White House. He can simply sit down on the ground, put all of the people that he needs into their country to get out whatever particular mineral that he needs to be getting out, and he can send that back to the United States by the boatload. Doug Ford doesn't seem to have a clue on what needs to be done. He doesn't seem to understand that there is things that have to happen. Grass needs to get bent, trees need to be cut down, that grow back, so that we can start to develop the economy of this country, instead of just taking it out of the ground and selling it to people who are willing to develop it and make a lot of money off of it. Doug Ford doesn't seem to be, I don't know if he doesn't have the ability, or if he's just terrified that somebody might picket, Queen's Park. I don't really know, but I know that what is required right now are people who are going to do what needs to be done, not do what they're told to do.
I talked to all these governors, no matter if it's Republican or Democrat. And even the Republicans, behind closed doors, because they're terrified of their leader, that's pretty crazy in itself, that totally disagree with attacking their closest friends and allies. I spent 20 years of my life in our Chicago, New Jersey plant. I still call people up on a daily basis, and they're all saying, even the Trump supporters are saying, this is crazy what he's doing, attacking. One guy said his little brother north of the border. I can't wait for the midterms. Then we'll fix his little red wagon.
All right, let's ignore the fact that he says he's talking to them behind closed doors, because there's no proof in that, and that's not what they're saying when they're down there. Okay, fine. So you have two factories in the United States yourself, so you're an American businessman, just like Mark Carney. Maybe that's why you're so happy to be on his coattails. You're going to fix his little red wagon come the midterms. Does that mean that you get to cast a vote in the United States? Is that what's happening here? Let's leave all of that immature stuff aside, okay? Though the idea that you have two businesses coming out of the United States is something that really should kind of throw a little shade on you. Nonetheless, I want to talk about the word that you keep using, attack. Where are you living in this rhetoric that you think because the Americans are looking after themselves, it's an attack on you or an attack on Canada? It's not an attack on Canada. It's him looking after his own people. Because you put up a fence doesn't mean that you're attacking your neighbor. So what are you on about? And the only person who's raising the prices inside of Canada is Mark Carney and Doug Ford and all of it's Carney's tariffs that are impacting my life. It's Carney's tariffs that are bringing up the cost of almost everything, because you'll say in one breath, Carney, well, we're your biggest client. We get all of your American stuff. And now we've added 25% to it so that we can have that money in our own pocket so that Canadians can pay for the car that I'm driving, though they are not allowed to have it themselves. I mean, the Carney tariffs are the ones that we need to be talking about, Premier Ford. You're talking like, I don't even know, like the level, the lack of maturity in your discussion, the lack of a grasp of geopolitical issues is undoubtedly why, even though you've been in power for all these years, nothing is happening. No progress is being made. You still have the same problems many years later.
We have a prime minister down there, and he's going to be sitting down, and he's going to give it everything he can.
Yeah, he gave everything he could, all right.
This is a time to unite the country, not people saying, oh, I'm leaving the country, or I'm doing this, I'm doing that. You know, united we stand, divided we fall.
What you mean, Quebec? Yeah, I know it's very aggravating that they always talk about leaving Canada and that they want to make sure that they break up Canada and they want to separate from Canada. I wish they'd either do it or not do it. Just quit talking about it already. As for this united we stand, divided we fall, how come it is that you feel that the only vision is Mark Carney's? Why are you not behind the people? Why are you not supporting the people that don't agree with the poverty and the ESG and all of the things that come along with net zero? Why are you not the one who's telling Canadians that, you know what, it's time that we put shovels in the ground and we get going on projects, all of them, not just one here and one there, every project we can think of. United we stand, Premier Ford.
Our great finance minister talk about the critical minerals. We have more critical minerals here than anywhere in the entire world. You know, we hear about Alberta's oil, and God bless them. We would have more funding, more money coming into our province than Alberta's oil.
Well, then, by all means, let's leave them in the ground and blame Trump for our problems. They must have ran a poll or they must have done something, because overnight, Doug Ford completely 180'd his position, whereas he was talking about how it's all Trump's fault and we all need to be, you know, blah, blah, blah. Then they had a first minister's meeting. Of course they would, after the disaster of Mark Carney's appearance in the United States of America.
Congratulating him on how well he did yesterday and the restraint he showed.
The restraint he showed, the awe he showed, the lack of strength and elbows up that he showed. Come on, the restraint. Oh, the cope.
I think everyone's feeling relatively good on the meeting yesterday. And I was pretty blunt. I said, you know, it's time that your government starts showing some love to Saskatchewan and Alberta, because as I said, like, the last prime minister showed no love. Matter of fact, to the contrary. I'm a big believer of pipelines, big believer of getting rid of C-69, and we need to unite this country. And the way we're going to unite this country, as I mentioned to the prime minister in front of the premiers, show some love to the people of Alberta and Saskatchewan. And let's start diversifying our trade when it comes to oil. Let's start building pipelines west, east, north, and yes, south as well. Spoke pretty strongly in support of Alberta and Saskatchewan because they've been ignored for the last 10 years. They've been treated terribly, to be very frank. Quebec, you know something? I think Premier Legault is working on something right now, but I really encouraged Premier Legault to get that pipeline through Quebec. The last poll I saw was in the high 70s that people want that pipeline. We don't have to be so reliant on the U.S. This is a game changer now. This is an opportunity to build ports in the north, no matter if it's through James Bay or through Manitoba up there in Churchill.
So what I'm seeing is a guy who left that press conference yesterday, saw the disaster of Mark Carney and the Liberal Party in Washington, realized that the entire country thinks they're a laughing stock, even people who supported the Liberal vote. The NDP supporters of the Liberal are right now running like to the hills. And Doug Ford all of a sudden is like, you know what? Maybe Danielle Smith and Scott Moe are right. We need infrastructure projects. And, oh, this is an opportunity for us to build Canada up instead of worrying about that Donald Trump is doing, even though he spent all of that yesterday slamming on Donald Trump. Now, all of a sudden, it's like, oh, Trump's doing us a favor, which I've been saying from the very beginning. This is only going to help Canada. The unfortunate problem is that we have the net zero guy in charge. And I'm very pleased to see that he crumbled and fell, because we all told you he would. I mean, it's a personality that you're looking at, and there was no way in the world that a guy like Mark Carney, who is, fragile and delicate and can't interrupt anybody, is going to be able to withstand the bombastic personality of Donald Trump, who's been sued, who's been impeached, who's been in front of all kinds of different world leaders. I mean, it was night and day, the contrast. Now, how long will this Liberal government hold on? I suppose that's up for a different video. I just wanted to show you the contrast, the difference. And I'm not even done. He also reversed his position on a lot of things, but there's some stuff I want to show you, a couple of more clips that I want to show you so that you can understand just how far from in one 12-hour sleep Doug Ford has flipped. Oh, it's almost embarrassing, right? But at least now we can say that we have Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Ontario on board, and obviously Quebec wants to go their own way again with their separation desires and how they think that they can do things differently than the rest of us. It won't take long for them to come. They'll either they can join the United States. I suppose that's one option. There's an issue there that nobody wants to say out loud, and I will cover in a different video.
On the auto sector, well, hopefully, as we move forward with this deal, hopefully we're going to see no tariffs, so we can reassure the auto workers that they're going to have a job. I'm going to continue fighting to keep that third shift going at General Motors. And then the other area, let's start thinking outside the box. How about military vehicles? We're experts at building vehicles, and General Motors, the union out there, I give them the credit. They're the ones who came up with the idea. And General Dynamics, too, light armored vehicles. There's an order pending, and we need the feds to start accelerating these orders. Yeah, no, I understand that. We're going to be there to support them any way we can. We'll protect our auto workers, and we'll retrain them. And this goes back to our original point of let's start getting infrastructure projects moving. Let's start making sure that the federal government, when it comes to procurement, starts procuring, be it vehicles or ships being built here in Ontario.
I let those two run together because they were the same theme. Now, if you were listening closely, you heard him say that he's going to try to protect the jobs from the auto sector, even though yesterday anybody that watched Mark Carney and Donald Trump heard everybody in the room say that they are doing everything in their power to stop the auto sector in Canada being able to give cars into the United States, which is a significant decrease in the amount of staff it would require to give cars to Canada. And then there's Mark Carney saying that next year you can't buy a combustion engine vehicle in Canada because of the net zero and the ESG and the environmental aspects of having only electric cars, which he wants to have done in the next 10 years, every Canadian having, despite the fact that we have no electricity. Nonetheless, the idea that the automakers are going to continue to manufacture 3 shifts for the market of Canada is very unlikely. And then he's like, well, what about, military vehicles? And I'm curious, do we make electric tanks? Is that a thing? Do we have electric Jeeps in the Army? I'm not sure, because when I look at Mark Carney's security detail, they're all made out of Suburban, and they are absolutely not electric, which is kind of a hypocrisy, I suppose, that we can cover at a later time. I wanted all of you that are living in Southern Ontario that are impacted by the auto industry to hear to hear Doug Ford say, no, we're going to retrain them. That's why we need to get the infrastructure jobs up and running. So you're going to have your nice automaker job replaced with digging ditches, like I had said earlier, and, pouring asphalt and, other jobs that I don't mind. I mean, I have no problem doing those jobs, or I know like those are good jobs to have. They're not necessarily the same job as an automaker job. They end come the winter, for example, and they often take, many months off. So, anyway, there's that. Then we got to look at the idea that Doug Ford said, no, what we need to do is get the government to continue the procurement so that we can have these Jeeps being built and ships built in Ontario. Now, certainly there's a market for having some ships built in Ontario. However, that wouldn't be my first choice, that we should put most of these ships in a shipyard. And I will cover that in a different video. I want to start talking about the military procurement, and I want to talk about the weakness of Canada on the military stage. There's so many aspects that I need to cover, and I'm one human, so you'll have to bear with me. I'm a one-man show. I don't have any support staff. Anyway, what I want you to hear is how Doug Ford thinks that we should take tax dollars and buy Jeeps. The problem, of course, is that you're not generating any money. So where are you hoping to get these tax dollars from? Alberta? Is that what you're hoping to do? Because you're not generating any economy. One of the things that the Americans have is an economy, right? So they don't need to sell everything to another country. They can sell it to themselves. And that, as a result, they can make their own tanks and their own Jeeps and their own all the rest of it. Airplanes and aircraft carriers and submarines and the list is long, and they make a lot of money selling those munitions outside into the world. Maybe that's something we should consider exporting. However, to say to yourself that we're going to be waiting for the government to give us tax dollars, that's a law of diminishing returns. There's no way that can stimulate the economy to the degree that you think it can. What we need is investment, and we need investment from the private sector. We need people to be making these Jeeps for profit, just like they're making the cars for profit. We need to realize that one of the reasons that the Ukrainian conflict is so bad, and one of the reasons that the United States are able to destroy the Yemenis the way that they are, is because the new theater of war is the drone. The drone is what is causing a lot of the problems that are happening across the planet. Well, I don't know about causing the problems. I suppose they're stopping as many as they're causing and all the rest of that, depending on which side of the battlefield that you happen to be on. But the drone is one of the ones that Canada could be making. We have all of these chemicals. Why are we not making munitions? Well, I'll tell you why. Because we've been selling them to the Americans, who are doing all kinds of things, just like the oil. So there's a full stop required on much of our economy. How much of that Mark Carney's going to let us dig out of the ground? Well, he wants you to wait 2 to 3 years instead of 5 to 7 to start a mine or to get steel manufactured. And, oh, by the way, you can only buy this one particular steel, and you're not allowed to have a combustion engine, so you got to buy a battery, though all of the battery plants that we had invested in have collapsed. And it runs around in circles and circles and circles. And I come right back to it for all of you that cast your vote that way. This is not the leader that's going to get us out of the economic crunch that is coming. And if we're not careful, it will be the demise of the country if people become that poor. Now, at least Doug Ford seems to have turned a corner. He seems to have snapped out of it. And I hope that he holds it. I hope that he doesn't flip-flop and go back and forth and all over the place. Because, he must look at his province and realize how many conservative ridings are there for the first time ever. And people must realize that what they prefer more than anything is money. They want to have a decent job, a decent house. I mean, they just want to live the middle-class lifestyle. That's what they've been hoping. That's why there's so many TV shows based on it, because that's what people are looking for. Anyway, I'm going to wrap here. I want to thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.